Hey there, welcome to today's episode. And what I want to do is just go through and talk about my current favorite setup, the reasons why I've kind of settled on this setup for now, some of the gear I've got rid of in order to do that, some new features, and a couple of other things. Also ties in quite well with the launch of the Roland SP404 Mark II update, the 4.04, which has the Koala sampler integration and things. Now, I will say before we get going, if you're looking for me to do a demo on that using the USB-C cable and showing you the functions of that, that's not going to be in this video. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, I'm not currently using that setup because I kind of like what I've got going on here more, and I'm going to talk you through how this is all wired and what I do with my setup. But the other thing as well is that at the moment, the update is fantastic. It gives us a lot of things, but it is really buggy. My SP keeps crashing when I try and do certain things with it. So it's the same story when it comes to my tutorial series for Koala and the SP404 Mark II as well. I'm not going to update those with all of the new features until we get a little firmware release that says that everything is settled and it's playing well and it's doing everything it should. Just a bit too buggy at the moment for me to bother doing that. Anyway, the other thing, this is live and unedited. I don't have a lot of time for video editing at the moment, so I'm going to put some time codes in. You can skip to the bits that you're most interested in. I'll try not to, go off on too much of a tangent. So we're looking at my current setup, and I call this my favorite setup because at the moment that is what it is. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that everything is plugged in and connected. I've got a very simple setup, really. We have the mixer here. This is a Tractor Control Z2. So I can use normal vinyl, of course, for my turntable when I want to bring samples in. But also I can use Tractor vinyl, control vinyl. So when I want to play with my own samples and scratch with them and things like that, I can do that. I've got the iPad, of course, which is kind of the main hub. Running Koala sampler. Bunch of other things, I'll talk about that as well. And then I've got the SP404 Mark II. In order to do this and kind of move forward and be kind of committed to what I want to achieve, which essentially is a studio that I walk into each day. And if I want to make my YouTube video for you guys, it's set up and I can do that. If I want to just make some beats, it's set up and I can do that. And if I want to, come in and do some, sometimes I like writing music a little bit more and doing kind of, kind of composing like sketches and things that I use for making sample packs and kind of fake samples and stuff. I can do that as well, hence the little nano key here. And as I said, I'll go through all of the steps and how it's linked. A couple of other new additions to the studio are these Genelec 8010As, which are the absolute baby Genelecs. They are tiny, they're about the size of my hand. However, for the size of them, they don't half pack a punch and they are really clear in the upper sort of high range and the mid range. They're not going to blow your socks off with their low end performance. However, it is definitely better than what I thought it was going to be. These little 3-inch woofers can, they can put out a bit of a punch. They're not terrible. And the other thing that I did there to kind of just, I suppose, complement that system is that I bought a MKII sub. Now, most of the gear that I buy, I end up buying used because I just like saving money. It's the way things go. I got a really good deal on the two Genelecs, and the MKII sub was the same. I think the MKII sub was 200 new, or close to that in the UK. And I picked it up for just under 100 quid. Now, the reason I like this one is it's not the most high-end subwoofer. If you look at the frequency response and everything else, it's not going to blow your socks off in terms of its performance, but it's cheap, it is loud, and also it has this function here. So what's cool about it is it has this remote control. Now, the main circle here that I'm playing around with controls the main output, which goes to the Genelecs, which are running through the sub. And the control underneath is a separate one for the sub itself, which is really nice because it means that you can crank up your volume, of course, and get that to whatever level you like. And then you can bring the sub in slowly to whatever desired level you need. There's a couple of advantages of that. One, it means that I can just go off the very nice flat response of these Genelecs, because I think as they are, even without the crazy low end that you might get from bigger monitors, they've got a really nice flat feel to them. And I think you're going to get a pretty good mix. If they sound good on these little things, I think it's going to translate well to a bigger mix. But when I need to listen to the sub and I want all of those lower frequencies that these probably just can't reach, then that's going to be, the way that I get around that. So that's, there are a couple of other little things that I've added to the studio. But other than that, it's a pretty simple setup. in order to move forward and put this plan in place, it means that I have to stop buying gear, which has become a bit of a bad habit. I had the Teenage Engineering KO2. I've had the Polyend Tracker. I bought a Live and Lo-Fi 12, all of which barely saw the light of day, especially not on the YouTube channel. 2 Ableton Push 2s, which is a long story, but I ended up with 2 of them. And, Machine MK3 at one point, all that kind of stuff. The only one I have left currently is the MPC-1, and I do believe that I'm going to sell that in the not too distant future. Not because it's bad, I absolutely love it, I've raved about it in other videos, but when I want to commit to something and I just want to get my workspace down, my studio down, stop buying gear so I don't have to keep plugging things in every video and changing it around all the time, you just have to kind of make some sacrifices and make some commitment to what you want. And when I took a look at Koala versus the MPC, and in fact the iPad versus the MPC, it's a little bit of a no-brainer that the iPad kind of won there. The MPC is fantastic, as I said. We've just got stems, so it's a little bit of a shame to kind of lose that. However, because I own the software, the MPC software, and you can get stems for £10, I still have access to all of that. If I want to use that with Ableton, I can even use the SP with the MPC. I was playing around with it the other day. With the SP with the MPC software is what I mean. Don't get me wrong, it doesn't work the same way as having the MPC, where you can split the stem on the fly and then, chop it inside of the device. You can still do that with the software, but it's not quite the same feel. But as I said, I'm not losing stems functionality. I also have RipX, which I'm going to do a dedicated video for shortly, because I do think RipX is very deep and it does a whole bunch of stuff. I'll get into that. But anyway, it seems that the iPad is the one of choice. And the main reason for that is because this is not just my sampler. It is my sampler using Koala Sampler. It's a very capable sampler and does everything that I personally need it to do. But it is also the way that I edit my videos for YouTube. It's the way that I do some artwork for my day job. It's the way that I do artwork if I'm making an album or something else. I do all the artwork. So this is a multi-use device. It's not just the sampler I can play with here. I can open up a synth app or something and run that into the SP. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why I would choose this. Another big thing that is, thrown around a lot is the idea of standalone. And if I'm being honest, there's nothing more standalone than the iPad. It has really good built-in speakers. They're not mixable. You're not going to do any great mixes on them, but I would argue that the MPC Live 2, which I guess is the equivalent, I don't think they're particularly great for doing a mix on either. So it's portable. It's got a huge battery life. It does a bunch of other different things. If I really have to put that against the MPC, particularly the MPC One Plus, which is the one that I own, I'm going to take the iPad if I have to choose. And that's what I'm forcing myself to do, is to choose one of these devices. So here we are with the iPad that is the hub of things. A couple of things to talk about there as well. When it comes to Koala Sampler, if you are using an iPhone or an Android phone, and that is your only experience of Koala, I think you may find some frustrations with that simply because you don't have the real estate of this big screen. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that if you are a serious Koala user and you, you want the best experience is what I'm trying to say, then moving to a bigger scale iPad, this is a 6th gen 12.9 iPad Pro with the M2 chip, so I think it's kind of the best one currently until there's a new one out. But having this big screen makes a huge difference, because when it comes to things like sequencing, we can come in here and put all our MIDI notes in and play around, and it's just really nice to use. When I tried Koala Sampler on a phone, as much as it has all of the same capabilities, it feels very limited when you're trying to, really narrow down on these little MIDI notes and move things around and stuff. To me, that gave me a little bit more of a feeling of the MPC-1, and this isn't a thing about the MPC-1 versus Koala or anything. However, a couple of the reasons, again, that the iPad sort of shone out here and Koala did, is because with things like the sequencing, when we look at this editor, you have something very similar in the MPC world. It's like the same kind of grid, even almost kind of the same colors. And you can do the same thing. You can draw MIDI information in if you like. The big problem I found, and I guess it's because I'm a Koala user and then I bought the MPC afterwards, is that when I'm doing this, you can see I can just delete these if I want. I can draw them back in. I can move them around. If I want to grab them, I just hold and grab them all. It's very intuitive and very easy. So it means when you want to sequence something, you want to put some MIDI information in, which isn't the way I always work. Sometimes I just record stuff in as well, which you can do on both devices. It's a very simple thing. I want to move something off the grid. I can do it nice and easy. Although the MPC on the one that I had I think it's a 7-inch maybe, like LCD touchscreen, I found it was still a little small. I found that on occasion I was really having to zoom and it was a little bit awkward. And the big problem for me was that it has a tool set. So at the top of the MPC screen, when I draw a MIDI note in, do something like this, you can see, very simple. I want to get rid of it. I just touch it again. I can do that. With the MPC, you have to choose the tool first. So I need to choose the brush tool. I put this in. Okay, I don't want it anymore. I've got to go back and select an eraser tool, and then I can do that. If I want to grab it, I need to use the selection tool. So I have to click that tool and then come back, rather than just being free to move around the grid and move things. So in terms of workflow and Koala, this is the little, these are the little things that add up and make my workflow nice and easy. Doesn't mean you don't have a different experience or that this is the way things should be or anything like that. Just giving you my honest opinion on what I think about that. And that was one of the things. The other thing in terms of it versus the MPC is that with Koala, even just inside of the Koala app itself, I felt like I could get a finished song to completion with a couple of the tools that it has available. Now, I know a lot of people talk about the fact that Koala doesn't have a song mode like the MPC does, where you can essentially tell it what sequences to play in what order and let it do its thing, similar to pattern chains on the SP404 Mark II. But what you can do is you can play these live and in order, and you can get it to wait for the sequence before you change to the next thing. So you can record out that way, but you can also just grab these sequences and just add them together. And you'll notice it will tell me, do I want to add it to the end? And I've just made that sequence longer. So for me, I would make my song like the intro, the verse, and the chorus exactly as I would on the MPC. And then if I just want one playable full song, I put them all in order into one sequence and then let that sequence play out, and I can track it out. And I can track it out directly to Ableton when I show you how I've got all this wired up in a second. I can do that directly. I can also export as an Ableton live set, which again, you can do on the MPC as well. So there's multiple ways of working around things. Just wanted to point that out because I figured that might be one of the main reasons somebody might lean more towards the MPC, is that they don't think that there's some kind of song mode on here, but I would argue that is a song mode. Anyway, aside from that, when we're talking about making a song, let's say I've built one sequence here, it's a full track, it's got all my samples, got everything that's going on in it, and I'm happy with that. If I wanted to just stay in the box inside the iPad essentially, and I want to get that out to the world, Koala gives me enough tools to allow me to do that, because now with the mixer, if we go into the mixer here, we have this output channel like you would have in a DAW, and the MPC has an output channel as well, of course. You can add insert effects and all that kind of stuff. I couldn't find a LUF meter inside of the MPC. Doesn't mean there isn't one, maybe I've overlooked it. But in terms of doing this on Koala, I can come in here and add a meter, maybe after I've added compression and a limiter and everything else, and I can see the LUF level that I want to achieve. So I can take my song from start to finish, completely mastered, out of the box, and, export it out as a file ready to go directly inside of this. And even if you don't want to do it this way inside of Koala, because this is an iPad and it is a multifunction device, I can then do that inside of, say, something like Logic on the iPad. I can bring in other things. There's there's other ways to separate the audio out. So really, for me, the iPad is just the more flexible device. Makes sense, but I know some people, they're going to say, well, I prefer the MPC for this, this, and this. Doesn't mean you're wrong, just means, you like something different to me. So anyway, once I had decided that this was going to be the hub of the studio, essentially, the bit where I come in and I want to do the ideas, I want to put my sketches down, maybe make them into full songs, maybe just stem it out and put it into Ableton and then work on it from there. Once I got this in my head, I was like, okay, everything else needs to, expand from here. So I want to show you how I've got everything set up, because it might help you out with a couple of things, and I do get asked a lot in the comments about what hub I use and other stuff like that. The iPad stands here. Obviously, I've got this connected to my Kingston hub, which is tucked under. Unfortunately, for the sake of not having 1,000 wires everywhere, it's kind of tucked out of the way. The Kingston Nucleum hub is the one that I use. You could use an Amazon, cheaper version and everything else. I'm pretty sure it would do the same thing. It's basically a hub that allows you to plug in multiple different things. So you can plug your SD cards in, which is great for pulling up your samples, just like you would with an MPC or whatever. You want to just have direct access to the samples, you can do that. The other thing that we've got, of course, is like an audio out. So let's start talking about how things are connected. The audio out, so all of the audio that comes from the iPad is currently being sent to the line in here inside of the SP404 Mark II. And I'll touch more on these as we go through, but essentially that means that all of the audio passes through the SP so that I can use all the SP effects and get all the, nice things. Because the sound in this is fine, but it's like the MPC really. The MPCs, the newer ones, they don't color the sound, or at least they're not supposed to. They're supposed to be a very flat sound. And then the way you color it is by adding your effects and doing everything else. The earlier MPCs were renowned for having their own sound, like the 2000 XL has apparently got whatever the analog circuitry in it that makes it sound like an old MPC. So with this, we have kind of a similar deal. The audio output from the iPad and Koala sampler, I find to just be very flat. It's not colored. It doesn't do anything. It's got no, it's not adding any color to it. When it hits the SP, though, we can start to add some of that. And I do feel like, because this is a little analog standalone thing, I'm not sure if it's my imagination, but everything feels a little bit nicer when it's been sent through the SP. Just my opinion, but seems to be that way for me. So all of our audio is being sent out of the iPad into the SP. That's one of the first connections. Connected to the hub here, this Kingston hub, is a Behringer, I think it's called a UCA222. It's a little red box with a couple of red and white RCA connections on it, one input and one output, so a very basic audio interface, if you like. Has a USB connection, which is connected to the hub itself. So I have a separate audio interface, if you like. That audio interface is connected to this box here at the top, this little selection box. And all that does is it just allows you to select various different inputs rather than having to unplug things. So let's say I want to record from the vinyl, which I'll show you in a second. I do that through one switch here. I change the switch to another channel, another input. I can bring in some cassette. I can bring in audio from any other device. Just means that I don't have to keep unplugging things. And it's very cheap, doesn't do anything, doesn't need any power. I got mine from Amazon for less than 20 quid, I think. And you can just select different audio sources. Has a volume control, doesn't give you any gain increase, so it's not like a signal booster or anything like that. But it will allow you to control the volume of the inputs coming through. So if you just need to reduce it down a little bit, you can do that. I generally try and set it up so I don't really need to touch things too much. So that's the first one here. If we do a little quick demo of this, if I switch this to input 1, we take a look at Koala sampler here. It's a little bit awkward because I'm reaching over my turntable because of where my mic is, but if I just drop that on there for a second. Hopefully as I increase this, you will notice the input from the turntable is on. Don't want to play too much vinyl because I keep getting told off for copyright. But if I hit my headphone icon, you can hear that there, plays the vinyl. So nice and simple. Means that all of my vinyl, my Z2 mixer here, which I can use Tractor to use Tractor control vinyl, do scratches. I can bring all of that audio into Koala and I'm good to go. Very handy, of course, for sampling and everything else. Now, if we scoot over a little bit, the next thing that we've got on this audio input here, if I select channel number 2, can't really do a demo of this because I don't have anything set up for it yet. But what happens here, my audio output from my SP404 is going into my 4-track. Now, unfortunately, because of real estate and how wide my camera angle is, I can't get the cassette player in as well, but it's a big vintage kind of 70s looking 4-track cassette recorder, and that's what it's for. It was for, doing 4-track, recording bands and stuff like that. At some point I'll do a video on it because I think it's a really cool, quite rare piece of kit. And what that does, of course, is it allows me to do another input source, something different. I want to play old cassettes. I want to do stuff with cassettes and that kind of sound. I can bring things through 4-track into Koala, and I can do exactly the same thing, and I can sample and all that. Unfortunately, can't do the demo, but you get the idea. I'll come back to some of this as well, because there's some other functions, but I just want to talk about the basic things for now. If I switch up to the third input that I have at the moment, I've only got 3 plugged in. I have the room to put another 3 in if I like, so maybe in the future I'll get some other gear that I want to put in there. But for now, if I switch to the third, that is taking audio from the iMac. That's bringing anything from my iMac in. So if I wanted to take from YouTube or Spotify, stuff like that, which generally I do directly from the iPad because of the screen recording function of Koala. Again, when we talk about MPC versus Koala, the fact that I have the ability to sample directly from the device itself, I don't need a turntable or anything, it's going to be another win for me. But generally, the big thing I have it set up for here on this third input is to bring Ableton into the mix, because I like Ableton a lot. I like the plugins that I've spent money on over the years. I've got effects and I've got a whole bunch of other things in there. And this little Korg Nano key I'm just using as a very little, little mini controller. I have a bigger Arturia one, which I think is nice. It's a bit nicer to play on. But for a little setup for everyday use, this is just fine. This is connected, the Nano key is connected to my iMac, so hopefully I have something loaded up. Can't hear that actually. Let me just check my Ableton screen because I've been messing around with it. What have we got going on here? Let's just check we are on the right channel. I think it's channel number 3. It's because we don't have our headphone icon turned on, so let's turn that on so that we can hear the audio signal. I just loaded up a Rhodes inside of Ableton, which is like a Native Instruments Rhodes. Threw a few effects on there, there's a little delay and some reverb, but just so that you get the idea. So all of the sounds, anything that I want to bring in from Ableton, I can do. And because of Koala's nice and simple setup here, I just want to do record. I've now got that. Really, really cool. I love the idea that you can just bring things in and sample so quickly. Obviously, it's the same deal. I didn't sample the vinyl, but again, just hold record and the vinyl's in there. So I can select all of these inputs, all of these different sounds. And even if I wanted to, say, make some loops inside of Ableton using the MIDI capture, I can do all of that here with this setup without having to change anything. I can, use my mouse here and work in Ableton all day long and then ship it down and, bring it to Koala for effects and all that kind of stuff. And that kind of brings me on nicely to the next part, and that is the idea of looping. So not only do I like this system for what it does, of course, it's very cool that we can have these sounds and everything running through. The other benefit here is that I can use this in conjunction with my SP, which is known for its effects. So let's say I have this same thing again. We'll keep the headphone on here. That's how that currently sounds, that particular Rhodes. But if I wanted to add some effect to that, say like a filter, and obviously I've filtered that right out, but when I record, we're recording that filtered frequency and that recording, in the same way, which I think is really cool that I can then loop that audio back through Ableton, apply the vinyl effect if I wanted, or some compression, whatever it is, send it right back and start playing with it. And the whole system is kind of designed like that as well. So if we move back over to the idea here with Koala, so what we've got is 2 kind of outputs for Koala, and this is a big reason I'm not currently using the SP and Koala kind of integration that's just been launched, is because you need to use the USB-C cable to connect the 2 devices, and that's fine. And maybe you can kind of achieve some of the same things that I'm doing here, but ultimately for me, I kind of prefer this. I'm sending my output back to Ableton, back to the iMac essentially. So what that means is that when I have something like, I don't know, let's see what's in here. What have we got? Okay. Got a little drum break there, easy to load up. Nice and simple. If I want to apply some effects to this now, like say from the SP, so I don't know, let's choose, the 303 effect. Add a little noise or something, a little flutter. You can hear gritted up those drums. I'd dial that in, of course. But because it is the way that it is looped through and the way that it's coming back through Ableton into my device, I can do exactly the same. And if we just turn that effect off there for a second and stop this, you'll see it's recorded. You can play around with your input volumes. But if I normalize that, you can hear it's baked in that effect. So we're essentially resampling using the SP effects directly back into Koala so that I can play around with it. So I'm not limited to just having the SP effects on the output of this, because of course I can make my track and then I can throw a bit of vinyl sim on and stuff. I really wanted to be able to loop this thing back in so that I can use it at any part of the kind of beat making process that I like. So pretty happy with how that worked out. And it's exactly the same story when we move over to the cassette player, which again, unfortunately you can't see the cassette player in action. But if I wanted, say, my drums with, real tape feel, I can play these out, record them to cassette, and because of the way this loops back in, because it's sent back in as an input, I can record those, these drums through the tape machine and then back in, and the same with any sound, any synth, whatever it is that I want to do. If I want it to have like a real, cassette feel, I can do that with real cassette, and I think that's, it's a pretty exciting kind of opportunity there to, I don't know, just experiment and give what is quite digital, like quite an analog sort of feel. So anyway, that is the basic setup really. There's not a huge amount to it other than that. In terms of the wiring, yeah, it gets a little bit complicated because you need to use the box, and I've got a few things coming over. At some point, maybe what I'll do, if people are interested in this, I'll try and draw up like a proper wiring diagram of it so that you can see how everything is connected. I just wanted to kind of talk about it more so because of this, this problem of like buying gear constantly. And for the channel moving forward, I just kind of, I don't know, I think sometimes it's better to be kind of like the master of, what's the expression? Jack of all trades, master of none. I think I'd like to be the master of something at least, or, be more proficient with my devices rather than just keep buying something else and then learning about it and then selling it and a whole bunch of stuff, which is on me, of course. I'm sure there's plenty of other gear heads out there who are addicted to doing the same thing. So with that said, that is basically what I wanted to cover here for the video. It's just my basic setup on how I go about things. And in the fourth, the sort of upcoming videos, I will, be using this setup, and I'll go into more detail. The final thing here, just to sort of touch upon and to keep some kind of structure to this video, is the idea of the new SP404 Mark II and Koala updates. As I say, I don't want to bring any tutorial videos out until the firmware is stable, because if I start doing it now, it's going to be a bit of a pain. But in terms of the collaboration here, I'm really impressed with what's happened, because I think the idea that a big, massive company like Roland, who have been around for years, are supporting like a smaller company like Elf Audio, and, let's be fair, they're kind of rivals in a sense. I even made a video myself quite a long time back about the idea that, which should you buy? Should you use Koala or should you use the SP? Some of the differences and everything else. And as two separate devices, they actually have quite a lot in common. They're little samplers, so you can do resampling and, quite a lot of similar functions. The SP kind of wins out because it has a DJ mode and a few other things that this doesn't. However, obviously they've decided to get together and bring these two together. Now, the big reason, as I've mentioned, I've showed you my system here and why I prefer having it kind of set up like this. One of the big reasons for me, aside from the crashing of the SP at the moment, is that I can't really understand the need. I mean, I get that you want to play with the hardware because it's better. So if you can get the hardware to control Koala, I think that's really good, and it does to a certain extent. And for me, that's where the kind of the interest drops off a little bit, is because I think we're still in the early days. If we suddenly see the ability to use our control knobs here to be shifting our start and end points and maybe to punch in slices inside a Koala, then yeah, maybe I could see myself using it more. But there is still something about the fact that if you've got a decent size iPad like I spoke about, Koala works really well just as is. These, you're not going to struggle with these pads. Okay, they're not velocity sensitive. I still struggle to get velocity sensitivity set to a good standard on the SP404 Mark II. I've struggled with it ever since I bought it. It's either in fixed velocity mode or it seems to go really quiet. It's a couple of things that I've just never really got the velocity right on these pads. Maybe it's just me, but anyway. If we suddenly get the functions to control pretty much everything in Koala, maybe I could see myself using the hardware then. And maybe sometimes, like at that point, if you're only working with the iPhone, then a little iPhone screen at the top of the SP and the ability to control everything here, that kind of makes more sense. But when you've got the big iPad like this and the SP, yeah, I love using them together in the way that I've just shown you, but I just don't know about this idea of controlling one with the other, because I just, maybe I'm missing the point somewhere along the line, but I just don't really see how it speeds up my workflow on either device. I also like my current setup as well, because I can't remember if I mentioned that, but if I'm repeating myself, apologies. But I can still use the SP completely standalone as well, because there are days when I don't want to use Koala. I just do want to play around on the SP. I still really like the workflow of the SP, and with the new updates, there's a lot of things I'm looking forward to exploring once the firmware settles down and we stop having so many bugs. I've been playing a little bit with the looper and a couple of other things, but it keeps crashing out on me. And just for the sake of mentioning this in the video, this latest update for me with Koala, obviously to sync with the SP404 Mark II, means that I'm having some problems with my screen recording when I try and import a video. I get Koala crashes out quite a bit as well. So whatever's been happening between the two companies, great. We've got this exciting new update. Love it. Love the collaboration and all that kind of stuff. But we need both companies to be stepping up and just giving us the fixes now to make this nice and stable. Other than that, I don't think there's a huge amount for me left to say, really. As I said, just make this kind of on the fly, this video, no editing, start to finish. One other thing, I think, just while it's on my mind, is the idea of buying gear. Coming back to this idea, buy all the gear you want if you've got the money and you can afford it and you don't mind it sitting on a shelf. My philosophy is definitely, if I'm not going to use it, it has to go. And I think the MPC will probably be the next one. If this setup stays and, gets more stable and everything else, chances are the SP is going to go. And I'm just going to enjoy what I've got and have, the fun of using these two devices. But what I will say is it proves a good point about rushing out to buy gear, which has definitely been my mistake. And I learned that the hard way with the KO2 from Teenage Engineering. That thing is so limited, I don't even know if it's got resampling yet. I've kind of stopped caring about it or even paying much attention to what goes on with it. But we're now into version 4 of the SP404. And when we think about how long ago this device was launched and how long it's taken to get here, there's kind of a reason, it's not always the newest gear that gives you the most. This thing is getting more and more capable every time there's an update. All right, we've got a few bugs to iron out, but they will get ironed out. And then, this device is even more capable than the 3.0, and I deliberately waited when I saw the SP launched initially. It just didn't do enough for me, and then version 2 came, and it was only at version 3 that I suddenly went, right, okay, now it does enough to make this thing worth owning. And of course, with version 4, it's getting better again. But just keep that in mind when you're buying gear. It's nice to rush out. I've done it myself. You rush out and you want to get the latest thing because it's the latest thing. I don't buy gear. Let's not have any misconceptions about why I buy gear. I only buy gear because I want to use it. I don't care. If the Ableton Push 2 had been the thing, I bought one recently, going back the way, if that had been the perfect device, I would have just used that, made that what my channel is about and what I do. Because ultimately for me, when I'm promoting my channel or what I'm doing here, I'm more concerned about the product and the art form and the thing of giving you the music and whatever it is. Sure, I want to teach you or talk about the process, at least as we go through, but it's not what the channel is all about. It's not about new gear acquisition. It's not about buying something different every week. I let myself get into that strange position of, for some reason I need to try this sampler now and I need to try this. And ultimately, this is when I really thought about it, Koala was kind of all I needed. The MPC, as I said, fantastic, nothing bad to say about it. But I would probably use 10% of what that device is capable of, if I'm being truly honest. I'm not a big MIDI guy. I don't sequence external hardware and do all that kind of stuff. I'm not really into step sequencing. I don't really use the plugins very much on it or anything else like that. I just bring samples in, chop them up, rearrange them, throw some beats in. I'm just a hip-hop sampling kind of guy. And Koala does an excellent, speedy job of doing that. So yeah, on that note, I'm going to sign off. I've rambled on for long enough. Take care. I'll see you guys in the next episode. And rest assured, when this firmware settles down on the SP and everything else, we get a little bit of an update. I will jump in and update my playlists, my tutorial playlists for Koala and the SP. I'll get them up to speed. I'll show you all the integrations. Even if I'm not going to use it, I'm still going to break it down, show you how to use it, do all that kind of stuff. Take care. See you guys in the next episode.